Welcome to Best of Reddit. Be sure to subscribe as we upload new content daily. Disclaimer: this isn't my story. I was, however, a supporting character in it. So back in the days of my youth, one of my friends, we'll call her Joanna, had a pet chinchilla. His name was Roman Polanski because, much like the filmmaker, when left to his own devices, he loved nothing more than getting on top of underage teenagers. We would lie next to each other on our backs and he'd crawl across our tummies. Joanna loved that little fluffy boy with all her heart. She'd saved up for him and all his expenses herself, watched a ton of YouTube pet maintenance videos, bought every book on the subject she could find, and read them cover to cover, and every weekend, we'd bake cookies and sell them in the park in order to save up for his pet food and chinchilla dust. Both of us would gladly take a bullet for the ball of sunshine. He was so cute. Neither one of us wanted to imagine a world where we wouldn't come home to her house after school. We'd do homework together till my mom got back from work to find him waiting for us. Enter Joanna's sister-in-law, Karen, not her real name but it might as well have been. I'd compare the woman to Satan, but it would be like comparing the bombing of Hiroshima to a dropped sparkler starting a fire on the lawn. She was passive-aggressive, lazy, obnoxious, narcissistic, and shallow with a tendency to name-drop. I often wondered what all those people she claimed she knew on a first-name basis must have done in a past life to deserve such a fate, along with why none of them had the living space to accommodate her and Joanna's brother when they got evicted from her apartment. Her bratty kids ended up seriously lowering the property value after one of their nastier tantrums, and the landlord kicked them out after they refused to replace the drywall. These kids were absolute sociopaths in the making. They had no concept or respect for boundaries, threw tantrums the moment things didn't go their way. They were 10-year-old twins at the time, considered destroying furniture to be their idea of a good time, and handled losing on Wii to warrant throwing the remote at the screen. But what made them truly vile was the glee with which they loved to kill small animals. Joanna told me that she once caught them snipping off a mouse's tail with scissors, would try to feed dogs chocolate, and upon being gifted with a hamster for Christmas, important for later, from their maternal grandparents, took their mom's stilettos and, well, you don't want to know how that story ends. Anyways, upon moving in as expected, the kids didn't even have their clothes unpacked before they began wreaking havoc on the house. The only time they were ever out of it was when they were at school. Meanwhile, Joanna's brother would spend most of the day at his job, and Karen occasionally refrained from indulging her Valium addiction long enough to audition for soap opera roles and community center plays. She considered herself the next Meryl Streep and was waiting to make it big with her amazing talents, hence why she didn't have a job. Then both of them would come home from work after Joanna's mom had spent hours watching their kids, she was a stay-at-home, insist that they were too tired to relieve her of her babysitting duties, and hole themselves up in the guest room until the kids' bedtime. In less than 4 days, Joanna's house looked like someone fired a missile into it. We'd go to her house after school to find the kids shrieking on the floor in a total meltdown. Joanna suspected that they may have some form of autism, but every time she suggested getting an official diagnosis, Karen would insist that her little angels were just overly creative. It certainly didn't help that Joanna's parents had a nasty case of grandparents' rabies and pretty much let the kids get away with anything. All the while, making Joanna clean up after their messes. As you can imagine, my friend was sweating bullets about Roman Polanski's safety. Her room didn't have a lock, and she didn't dare tell her niece and nephew not to go inside it because upon hearing such an order, the kids would make it their life's mission to figure out what she was hiding from them and prove she was right to fear for it. Already the little brats thought nothing of barging into her room and biting, scratching, kicking, dumping water on her in the morning, and helping themselves to her art supplies. She came home from school once to find out they'd swiped her dad's letter opener and shredded the canvas of one of her contest-winning paintings. So it was a good thing that she'd sneaked Roman Polanski into the attic in advance before everybody came over. Me and her worked together to distract the kids whenever we came back from school so that they wouldn't notice anybody sneaking into the attic and changing his food. Our little heist routine worked for over a month, and both of us were expecting a call from Hollywood any day asking to adapt our exploits into a summer blockbuster. Unfortunately, we underestimated the little monster's capacity to pick up on suspicious activity and stop shrieking slurs they learned from watching YouTube videos of Halo gameplays. At least I think that's what they were watching IDK long enough to get to the bottom of it. One day we come home from school to find Roman Polanski's soaking wet corpse inside his cage, the door of which was hanging by a thread on its hinges. Joanna is hysterical and it's all I can do to comfort my friend without breaking down myself. After she finally calms down long enough for her sorrow to turn to rage, we storm downstairs demanding to know where the kids are. We find them in the basement playing Mario Kart and demand to know what they did to Roman Polanski. At first they played dumb, but upon Joanna's mom coming down after hearing the commotion, Joanna screamed herself hoarse at them only to receive a smirk and feigned denial. They admitted to coming into the attic after we did the day before and discovering a giant guinea pig. They decided that to put their hamster's old ball back to use. While me and Joanna were at school, theirs let out earlier than ours, and my mom was taking a nap. They broke into the cage, and put him in the ball, which they then proceeded to put into the guest room bathtub in order to see him float. Unfortunately for Roman Polanski, the ball sank to the bottom of the tub and began to fill with water. There must have been a hole in it somewhere. The twins claimed they didn't realize that the ball was internally flooding from underwater, until it was too late. When asked why they didn't ask permission to play with Roman Polanski if they wanted to, they just batted their lashes and claimed they weren't sure who to ask since they didn't know who he belonged to. Joanna's mom put the kids in timeout for 15 minutes, but refused to punish them further. She insisted that it was Joanna's fault for not telling the kids about Roman Polanski and that, in the future, she'd know better than to be selfish with her pets. Joanna then tried to appeal to her brother and Karen, but the former shrugged and said nothing would bring Roman Polanski back from the dead, and the latter insisted that her babies didn't mean to hurt the little rat. I was heartbroken when she told me this the next day at school, but she urged me not to shed any more tears for Roman's sake. He wouldn't want us to cry. He'd want revenge. The Givens, you see, like so many women of her namesake, Karen loved herself a good soy latte. And upon realizing Joanna's mean coffee-making skills, she used to be a barista at Starbucks, began demanding that she make one for her every day. I know you need to get to school, but we're family. Recently we had discovered in biology that consuming large amounts of vitamin A can cause hair loss. Furthermore, like many women of her namesake, Karen was fond of essential oils. So much so to the point where she'd put a few drops of them in nearly every meal she ate. Yes, she was one of those kinds of Karens. She also was incredibly touchy about her hair care, using a shampoo bottle, and a special bar of luxury aisle soap that neither her brother nor the kids was allowed to use. One trip to the convenience store, the pet shop, and the Home Depot, and revenge was ours for the taking. The revenge. What followed was several weeks of discreetly spiking Karen's coffee with copious amounts of vitamin A supplements. Karen always added a ton of sugar to it, which I assume masked the taste. Then we went into the guest bathroom while she and my brother were both out. While Joanna emptied out half of Karen's shampoo bottle and refilled it with hair remover cream, I took her soap bar, sliced it up, and turned it into a sandpaper sandwich, trimming the ends, and melting it in the microwave just enough for all the layers to merge together while still retaining enough of the consistency to reshape it without indicating it was tampered with. Last but not least, came Karen's essential oils. This was the hard part given how she never even went to the toilet without it. She carried it in her knockoff Gucci purse, which she only ever took her eyes off of on Friday nights. But one trip to get water in the middle of family movie night, which was held in the basement, revealed to Joanna that the reason brother and Karen never joined everybody else was so that they could get it on in the guest room. She'd left the purse hanging on the door handle. She didn't want to think about what they were doing in that room that made it impossible to find a single square inch behind the door that kept the bag out of the line of fire. But she managed to tiptoe up to it, fish the bottle out, race back to her room and spike it with an extra potent dog laxative, before returning it. The fallout. Every day I came over to Joanna's, I would notice the guest room door locked. Karen had been confined to bed rest on account of not feeling so well. Trying not to laugh, I asked what was wrong with her. Karen had begun breaking out in rashes, losing her hair in alarming quantities, and kept randomly coming down with random fits of diarrhea. Joanna revealed later that she looked like Doctor Who if he was a cross-dressing hillbilly meth addict come back from visiting in Chernobyl. The simile makes me laugh to this day. Her temperature suggested it wasn't because of a fever, so everybody assumed maybe she had an allergic reaction. This was disapproved when 1 week later Karen managed to spread the rashes and hair loss to her husband and kids thanks to Joanna spiking their new shampoos and soaps after her mom made her do their shopping. She thought about slipping them the laxatives, but was worried about the long-term effects they'd have on kids. No one would miss them if they died, but Joanna didn't think Roman Polanski would want her to get arrested for his sake. Shortly afterwards the squatters came down with a nasty throat infection after Karen asked her mom to make Joanna to clean their toilet and she did so using their toothbrushes. Suffice to say the kids became a tad more manageable when they couldn't speak from all the bacteria in their throat. Of course they could still wreck things, but it was a bit more tolerable when they couldn't yowl at the top of their lungs anymore. Every day they'd come home in tears because kids at their school would tease them about their hair loss. Karen bullied the school into letting them wear hats all day, but according to Joanna they kept falling off whenever they threw their temper tantrums, leaving them vulnerable for mockery from all present. This resulted in them restricting that particular weapon of persuasion in their arsenal unless it was for something they considered major. Meanwhile, Karen's incontinence left the guest bathroom so rancid that I could smell the putrid fumes wafting out of it first thing I entered Joanna's house. Nothing could make the smell go away, no matter how many air fresheners they used. The smell got so unbearable that Karen and her brother tried to use the other bathrooms, but her parents refused out of fear that whatever they had would spread to the rest of the house. Apparently the highlight of Joanna's day was watching her brother and his kids beg Karen for at least 5 minutes on the john, only for her to scream at them to shove off. Her mom and dad wouldn't let them use other bathrooms either, since they most likely caught whatever Karen had on account of being in close proximity to her, when they slept together. Eventually the increasingly nauseating smell of the toilet became so intense from Karen using it nearly 24/7, she was convinced that consuming her essential oils in larger quantities would save her the cost-effort of a doctor's appointment, that Joanna's parents decided it was best to kick them out for their olfactory bulbs' sakes. This ended up being just fine with her brother. Being forced to restrict their bowel movements to that one foul-smelling bathroom was more than he was able to continually bear, and he moved his family in with a coworker. To this day, Joanna's never revealed the truth to her family, and she's found peace knowing that Roman Polanski can rest easy, having been avenged.